مرحبا بكم مرة ثانية. Welcome back. اليوم في هذا المهرجان وقعنا إطلاق جائزة التجار الصغار، وقعنا اتفاقيات ووضعت خطط وأيضا أعمال سوف نشهد نتائجها. ولهذا وجدنا أنه من اللائق أن تكون هناك جلسة حوارية مع أحد القادة في هذا المجال حيث يناقشون ما سيحصل. لهذا نبدأ برنامجنا اليوم بحوار ضمن مجلس القادة بعنوان الأثر الاجتماعي والمسؤولية المجتمعية ودور القيادة في بناء نتائج مجتمعية مستدامة. وفي هذا نرحب بسعادة ميساء النويس ومعها المحاورة لينا حسن بالله. تفضلوا المحاورة تفضلوا. اسمحي لي. Do they have their mics? Do they have their mics? Do they have their...
Thank you. أيوة سامعني؟ أهلاً السلام عليكم. طيب, I was told this session will be in English, so if you don't mind, we had Arabic in the morning and now we have English, so we can cover all the attendees. So as our lovely MC has said, this session is very important. It's about social impact. And let me start with something slightly uncomfortable. We live in a time where social impact is everywhere. Every report mentions it, every organization claims it, and every initiative is built around it. But if we're being honest, how much of it actually lasts? How much of it moves from a campaign to something that quietly and consistently changes people's lives? Because real impact, it's not a moment, it's a system. And building that system requires more than good intentions. It requires leadership that makes choices, institutions that work together, and a very clear understanding of what society actually needs, not just having points on paper. And that's exactly the conversation that we're going to be having today. And I'm happy to discuss it with Her Excellency, Maysa Al-Nouais, Executive Director of Community Engagement and Volunteering in MAN. So, Maysa, let me start with something also out of the ordinary. If we want to strip all of the buzzwords, what does social impact actually mean? And what's something people often misunderstand about how impact actually works inside any institution or any society, for that matter?
Thank you, Lena, for an amazing question. Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to talk about this topic because it's very close to my heart. If we strip away all the buzzwords, social impact is very simple. It's basically change that lasts. So not the intention, not the activity, and definitely not how much we're spending on the different initiatives. It's simply improving something in someone's life, and that improvement lasts. And often something that is misunderstood by a lot of people is that effort equals impact. That's absolutely not true. You could do a lot of activities, and yet the change or the impact that you create is very minimal. So, but if effort is planned well in advance, where it's measurable, where you're able to sustain it, then it would definitely lead to impact. So the shift we're trying to create here is to move from and push basically from doing more to changing more.
Yeah, you mentioned there's a disconnect, so between what people think they're doing in terms of effort, but the actual impact of what they're trying to do. So that's actually my next question. Where do you see the biggest disconnect between what communities actually need and what institutions think that they're providing, but are not really reaching where they need to reach?
Actually, the biggest disconnect I see is, in my opinion, I see a lot of institutions or companies working on a lot of different initiatives, but most of the time, they're actually working without understanding the real problem. So they're creating for the sake of creating. They're launching for the sake of launching. And here I would say, take a moment to understand what the real problem is and then create the solution. Communities don't need more initiatives. They need the correct initiatives that actually solve problems and social challenges. And I think it would be more beneficial for entities to take a chance, listen to the community. What are the social challenges that are prevalent? What is it that we need to resolve? And then create your initiatives. That way, we would ensure that the impact is way higher than just launching initiatives. We always, I think, have the tendency to want to do things quick, launch a lot of initiatives, do this, get quick results, but that's not really how it should be.
I think the pressure to get instant results and be quick and do something sometimes maybe just for the sake of doing it comes from maybe institutional pressures. And I wanted to ask you as an example of a decision that you've had to make where real impact may be conflicted with some institutional pressures, and how did you choose? Like, what choice did you make?
I think that's one of the most difficult things to actually look into. Choosing depth over speed is something very important. And I think a lot of times we're all very pressured from either leadership or, do this quick, launch it tomorrow. And we tend not to actually take a chance to think and see, is this really what is needed? I think we've all been through situations like this. And here, I would say take a chance to stop, evaluate and assess the programs you're doing, and then decide whether you should continue or not. I'll give you an example. We launched a program called Community Volunteering Activation Program. We launched it after working from 2019 to 2022, trying to, as part of MAN's KPIs, to create programs that have a volunteering component. Was it successful? Yes, it was. Did it deliver? Yes, it did. So then why did we want to change? We wanted to change because we wanted to make it more impactful. So we created this program, and basically it was, rather than MAN creating the opportunities or the programs, opened the floor for the third sector, startups, which we're seeing a lot of today, social enterprises, non-for-profits. We, through this program, helped them develop the solutions that were real solutions to real social challenges. We then funded them to run these programs, help them measure the impact of these programs. And the way we did it was, the first 6 months to 1 year was a pilot. And after the pilot, we would assess whether these ideas or programs were successful to be scaled up, or then we made the decision to stop it there. And that's where I say depth versus speed.
Just a question, you said measuring their success. How do you measure the success of a social impact project or something along those lines?
So there's a lot of things you look into when you're measuring success, and definitely it's not related to number. And I think a lot of times success is measured through activity-based. So how many people attended, how much funds we put, or things that are related to basically numbers and not outcomes. But I think it's very important for us to shift our mindset and basically ensure that our outcomes are clear, because if your outcomes are clear, you can measure and you can sustain it. You can't sustain something that you're unable to measure.
Let's talk about Abu Dhabi here. So obviously, Man and Abu Dhabi, what is Abu Dhabi getting right today in social impact that, if replicated globally, could genuinely change how this space works?
I believe Abu Dhabi is getting alignment right. Alignment in the sense that they're putting a lot of effort to align policies, efforts, funds, as well as social needs. And that's extremely important, because impact can't happen with efforts that are scattered. And what Abu Dhabi is doing right is bringing all these efforts together. to be sure that the impact is well seen. And I'm very excited to tell you about something that's coming up in Abu Dhabi. I can't say a lot, but I'll give you a teaser on the same topic. Abu Dhabi is creating a unified platform for social responsibility, which will make it very easy for all stakeholders to know what their role is. You'll be able to see what you can contribute on. Project owners will be able to put their projects up there. Contributors will be able to contribute. And you'll be able to see what the impact of each of the programs that you put funds on were, whether as a contributor and also for a project owner. So everything will be very clear to the program owner, to the contributor, and to the government, because they'll be able to see the bigger picture. So stay tuned. I think this is something very exciting coming up in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, for just making the process easier, making it more accessible and more transparent. But speaking about working together and removing sort of silos, so social impact, as you said, you gave an example of working with the private sector.
Yeah.
I think the community should be involved as well, and the government. In your experience, how do these three work together effectively to create impactful social projects that benefit people and are long-term?
I think that's very important. I always say it in a very simple way. The government sets and paves the way. The government would identify what the problems are. The private sector would then put the resources, whether it was financial, in-kind, and so on. And the community is the heart, because that's where actually you are able to understand who the beneficiaries will be and what the need is. And it's never beneficial for all of these three to work in silos. The success is that these three work together towards a shared goal and a shared, to deliver a shared impact. And I want to tell you a story here, an example, to showcase how this works. One day we got a contributor who came, and he said, you have great projects in your catalog, but I want a specific program that is developed to cater for blue-collar workers or workers that need dialysis but are unable to afford it because their insurance doesn't cover it. So we're like, sure, we can make that happen for you. We went to the regulator, Department of Health, and told them, can you verify that there is a need for this? And that's when I say government. And they did. Are you in to work with us? Yes, we are in. We then went to a private sector entity, Pure Health, and we were like, are you in to operate at cost? And we will consider it CSR for you. And they're like, yes, we're in. Then we went to the government. We're like, okay, now we need a building to convert to a dialysis center. And they gave that to us. We went back to the contributor and like, now we're ready to take your contribution, which we used as a CapEx. We then opened OpEx as crowdfunding, and we raised that amount. We even went the extra mile of allowing volunteers to come and do murals inside the building and artwork and do different volunteering work. So here you see a fully sustainable project coming together from every single player in the ecosystem.
A full cycle, and it benefits, it benefits everyone at the end of the day. That deserves an applause, honestly. And up until the artwork on the walls.
Exactly.
This can also be part of
and it's been so successful because had we looked into it as an unsustainable model, we would have been paying 1,200 per dialysis center. But because we looked into the sustainability and how we can create a sustainable model, the cost on us is 600 dirhams per dialysis session. Our second center is opening in Al Ain soon as well, so that shows you how successful it's been.
Wow, a very good example. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask about long-term impact versus momentum. A lot of initiatives we see create momentum in the moment, and everyone is excited, and it's very, momentous. But long-term impact is something that we rarely see in general when it comes to social initiatives. Why is it so hard to move from initiative-based activity to something that actually lasts?
I'll tell you why, and maybe we tapped on it in an earlier question. A lot of entities, when they launch initiatives, they don't think about the long term. They're like, okay, you know what, I'm getting fund, I need to launch quick, let's do it quick. But they don't think long term. They don't really think of the change that they want to produce in the future or the impact. And that's why a lot of it fails. I would, one piece of advice I would give is take the time to plan. Take the time to plan long term so that your project could be more sustainable and they would, you know, work whatever happens in terms of circumstances.
Okay, so let's talk about long term and a project becoming sustainable. What's the first sign that an initiative is not sustainable? Even if it looks successful on the surface, you say this is not something that can last long term.
I would say the first sign is if you're measuring your success based on activities. How many people you attended, how many activities you launched, how much you spent. If you're doing that, that's the first sign that you're not going to sustain. If your outcome is not clear, you won't be able to sustain. Another thing I would say is if there is dependency. Another sign is if there is dependency. So if you're very dependent on funding to continue, you're not going to last. Because you will continue being dependent on that factor, whether it is fund or anything else. If you can't stand up on your own, you're never going to be able to sustain yourself.
But can social impact initiatives sustain without funding? I don't want to say zero funding, but...
Definitely you need funding to sustain yourself, but let's say that you're dependent on getting your funding from MAN or from this company or from that company without actually looking into how can you pick yourself up on your own. Definitely you will use this funding the first year, the second year, the third year, but you can't always depend on that.
There needs to be a long-term plan for bringing in the funds.
Sure.
Everyone talks about social impact, obviously. But when does it actually become an operating model inside an institution? Not just, as we said, something that creates momentum, something that's sustainable as a model, as an operating model.
I would say when it stops being optional. When it stops being optional, everyone will stick to it. You will embed it within your planning process. You will ensure that, that measuring it will be dependent on you getting the resources. It will be dependent on you allocating the resources. So I would say once it moves from being something optional to being something that's a must, and it will be valued more, then it will become part of the operation plan.
Yeah, if leaders in this room want their impact agendas to stay credible and scalable, because that's always a goal, what should they focus on and what should they stop doing?
I think first of all, I would say leaders, clarity. Ensure that you're clear where you're going, your outcomes are very clear, your value that you want to create is clear, the change that you want to create in whatever you're trying to resolve in terms of a social challenge is extremely clear. What I would say to avoid is avoid launching for the sake of launching, please.
CSR and just ticking the box. And
exactly. Avoid calculating or thinking that the more effort you put, that you will create an impact. That's not how it works. And just make sure that you're aligned to the government's directions, because, you know, our government, especially in Abu Dhabi, everything is so clear, everything is so smooth. The challenges have been defined. There's a lot of support in terms of how you could work on it. So there's a lot of support there from the government. You just need to ask for it.
Maisa and Uwais, thank you so much for this very informative session. I personally learned a lot, and I hope everyone did as well. Thank you very much
for
attending. Thank you.